Susan Sullivan is a professor of law and politics at Temple University in Philadelphia. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Before we look ahead at the consequences of what happened a year ago, let's just go back a little bit. Do you think in a way it was a kind of a natural conclusion to Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, I think we're not particularly surprised. We're just horrified at the extreme results of what happened. But, you know, they were leading up to this. There was a lot of concern during the election on November 3rd. There were protests, there was some violence. And then thereafter, with all the challenges and all the vitriol that went with that. But I think we really felt at that point, by January 6th, that we were pretty much done with that. This was a relatively perfunctory day. This was a relatively straightforward, symbolic event. And so I think people were not expecting it to get out of hand and to not only get out of hand, but to really turn violent and turn into this aggression and this insurrection. So although, you know, looking back with hindsight, we're not surprised, I think at the time, the severity of that attack was somewhat of a surprise to us.
Professor, don't go anywhere. We're also joined by Patsy Widakuswara, who is the White House Bureau Chief at the Voice of America. I just promoted you, Patsy. Congratulations. Okay.
Thank you.
2/3 of House Republicans on that day voted against certifying the election result. What's that changed in terms of the political discourse 12 months on in America?
Well, honestly, not much. I mean, if you can look at it in the way that, you know, the majority of Republicans that are being polled still believe that the election was stolen by Joe Biden, for example. And if we also look at the process of the January 6th committee, which is supposed to be a process to bring together Americans under this one unified narrative to see what happened on January 6th and how to move forward from that, it is still a very partisan process. So there's a lot of a feeling of still being stuck in terms of polarization of how Republicans versus Democrats see the event. And I just want to touch on again on what Susan said about you know, the events of January 6th being surprising at that time. I just want to throw in my 2 cents. At that time on January 6th, 1 year ago, I was with the with a group of reporters who were polling for then President-elect Joe Biden, and we were moving towards the Queen Theater in Wilmington. He was about to deliver a speech on the economy at around 2:30 p.m. when images, these horrifying images that were shot by our colleagues who were covering the inauguration, the certification at Congress started coming in, and we were all horrified by it, and we were all surprised and shocked. And the same goes with President-elect Joe Biden's team at that time, and they had to postpone his remarks on the economy, and Biden did not end up speaking on the economy, but called out President Trump to plead to him to stop these rioters and to go on national television to calm the situation. So yeah, it was definitely a surprise when it happened. But now looking back, there's a lot of observations saying that this is a culmination of the undermining of the American institution that has gone on long since before January 6th.
Susan, many people were hoping that such a traumatic event might actually bring people closer together. But we've had Republican members of Congress today saying that they are not going to mark the anniversary in any way. I don't understand how they square the facts with their attitude. When the Associated Press did an investigation, it found there were 475 cases of voter fraud among 25.5 million ballots that were cast. How does that square with the way Republicans are behaving, some of them, on a day like today?
Well, I think what's really staggering is that these are the people who are under attack. These are the individuals who are hiding under desks. If the insurrection had succeeded, I don't think these people would have gone around asking about party affiliation. They were going to kill people. They're going to attack people. And party politics was not going to come into play. In fact, of course, they were calling for hanging Vice President Pence, who was the second in command of their own party. So from day one, I think we saw this violence being directed at anybody. And so it's shocking to me that not only are Republicans taking a position that appears to be entirely inconsistent with their democratic oath to protect and defend the Constitution against, amongst other things, domestic terrorism, but it just flies in the face of their own safety. So yes, this has become very partisan. The country as a whole was horrified by what they saw. A lot of people, like myself, or something of a news junkie, were watching. We weren't really expecting too much to happen, but people were watching. And then suddenly the news came through, as Patsy said, and everybody became glued to their televisions and watched this horror unfolding. So it's very difficult at this point for the American public to understand why the Republicans are not honoring this day and recognizing the horror of this day and marking this day. It should not be a party political issue, irrespective of your party. This was such an extraordinary event. This wasn't a riot about some social issue or an issue of criminal justice. There were lots of riots going on at the time about alleged police brutality. This was a riot that went to the core of the American democracy. And yet, so it's not a party political position. It's something that all Americans should be remembering, ensuring that they remember so it doesn't happen again. And so they can talk about it and see what can change.
Yeah, go on, Patsy. You want to say something? Listen, before you say something, I just want to explain to the viewers what pictures they're going to be seeing while you talk, because two of the more extreme members of the Republican Party, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, are currently together giving their own version of events and talking about what happened last year. OK, go on, Patsy.
So I think the one thing that we can underline here, if you want to understand why Republicans are behaving the way they're behaving, it's political expediency, right? And this just underlines the still very powerful grip that Donald Trump has on the Republican Party. It is politically expedient for these members of Congress, these senators who continue to reject or continue to push the narrative of the big lie, this baseless claim that the election was stolen, and therefore January 6th is not the big lie. The big lie is the election. That's kind of their logic into it. It really just underlines the fact that former President Donald Trump is still a very powerful force in American politics, can still make or break political careers, and will have a say in terms of who runs and who wins, both in the 2022 midterm elections and possibly in 2024.
OK, we've got about 30 seconds, so 15 seconds each. Patsy first. Is Donald Trump going to be president number 47 of the United States?
I do not have a crystal ball to answer your question. Certainly, one of the things that people are looking for to answer that, the key to answering that is to see how well the candidates that are supported by Donald Trump in the 2022 midterm elections do. If they do well, that may give another push for the former president to run again.
Susan, 15 seconds, same question.
Donald Trump once said if he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and people will still vote for him. I think that's still true. It's somewhat hyperbolic, but I think he's scary. I think Republicans are afraid of him. They need his support. They're concerned that if they speak out against him, they will lose that support. And so, as Patsy said, it's political expediency and it's political cowardice at this point.
Susan Sullivan and Patsy Widakuswara, thank you so much indeed to both of you.